Hello and welcome to LionWing Talks, a show where I discuss all things LionWing, tabletop games, Japanese games, and localization. I'm Bradley Hailstorm, founder and president of LionWing, also the editor on Convictor Drive, Armored by Grief, our latest TTRPG project that is now up on Kickstarter. It's been live since this past Tuesday. That's why we're here tonight, but I'll talk about that in a second. This is episode 34, titled Suiting Up, and I'll tell you why it's called Suiting Up in a little bit, or you'll just draw your own conclusions about suiting up and Convictor Drive. Let's talk about the elephant in the room, folks. It's been a year since I've done one of these shows. If you've been a part of the LionWing community for a while, if you are a veteran of the LionWing community, you know that I used to do these shows weekly. I started in February of 2021 and had one of these shows every single week. And it was a time for me to connect with the community, for folks to have a direct line to me, to ask me questions, for me to provide project updates on what was going on with our games, and also talk about some behind-the-scenes stuff and just talk about games in general, talk about localization in general. Primarily, we talk about Japanese games. After all, that's what LionWing is. We localize and publish Japanese games. But it's been a year since I've done one of these shows. Why? Where have I been? What have I been doing? Oh, a lot. So around the last time that I did one of these shows, we had just moved houses, I had just changed jobs, and my kids were getting older. And all of that sort of came together. And I said, you know what? I don't have the time. And when I do have the time, I do not have the energy to do these LionWing talk shows any longer. So I pressed the pause button, and I wasn't quite sure if I was ever going to unpause where I was, but here I am. I'm unpausing, and we're coming back. This is episode 34 for November 18th, 2022. It's good to be back. It feels weird to be back, but it's a good weird. I like it. I especially like it because of the occasion, why I am coming back, and that's because this is a very special episode of LionWing Talks. It is an AMA of sorts, although I guess you could say LionWing Talks has always been an AMA, mostly. But tonight it's especially an AMA because I called it an AMA, which means it's officially an AMA. And we're mostly going to be talking about Convictor Drive, though there was at least one person on the Discord who decided to ask me not one, not two, not three, but 4 questions, none of which had anything to do with Convictor Drive. So Retroflow, good job there. Good job reading. I'm just kidding. I will answer any and all questions. But I primarily want to talk about Convictor Drive because that is the project that is on Kickstarter right now. And it's the project that we've been working on for quite a long time. I think development like officially started last year sometime. So Convictor Drive, what is it? Well, it's a Japanese role-playing game, a tabletop role-playing game, a table talk role-playing game if you're in Japan. And it is sort of the first step of this new initiative for LionWing. So I mentioned this in one of the interviews that I did in the lead up to Convictor Drive's Kickstarter launch. I also make mention of it, I believe, on the Kickstarter campaign page itself. So going forward for 2023 and 2024, we are primarily focusing on role-playing games. Not to say that we won't be doing some board games here and there, but that no longer is really our focus. We've been around since 2018, and our mission up until recently has always been, well, we're just going to localize and publish all sorts of tabletop games. It could be card games, board games, RPGs, whatever. We'll do it all. And that was a fine model until it wasn't fine any longer. And earlier this year, I kind of took a look at LionWing and where we were at, because 2020 and more specifically 2021, I don't know if anyone heard, they were weird years. 2022, also pretty weird. But at the turn of the calendar year, back in January of this year, I said, all right, what am I doing with LionWing going forward? And I had to be true to myself, honestly. You know, my job is, there's a lot more responsibility at my 9 to 5. I don't know if anyone knows this, but LionWing is just a side thing that I do. This is not my full-time job. I got a 9 to 5-er, and that job's taking a lot more of my time. It's an executive level job. It's harder to get away from that type of job. My kids are getting older. I want to see and play with them more as they get older. And so I had to stop and say, hold on a second. If I'm going to do this LionWing stuff and I'm going to devote a lot of my time to it, you know, once I get home from work, and if I'm going to like take time away from my family to do this stuff, like I better be really invested. And I was starting to feel at the turn of the year not super invested, because just wasn't willing to really sacrifice my spare time for anything else other than my family. And so I took a long, hard look and said, all right, so what am I doing here? What is worth the cost of sacrificing time away from my family? And I kind of came to the conclusion, like, I'm really passionate about tabletop role-playing games. They're my preferred tabletop genre. They're what I play. I don't play a lot of board games or card games any longer. Ironically, I haven't for quite a while, other than the stuff that I was scouting in years past. But outside of like scouting stuff, I wasn't really playing a lot. I was still playing tabletop games. They just happen to be RPGs. And so I said, you know what? If I'm going to do this and I'm going to take time away from all the other stuff that's really important to me, it's got to be worth it. And I think RPGs are the only thing that really make it worth it for me any longer. So that's why we're doing a pivot. I know there have been some questions about what was driving that decision. And that's it. I mean, there are some other like market factors as well. The market is changing. The tabletop games space is changing. It's also, with inflation, it's just super expensive to print board games. It's super expensive to freight ship them. It's super expensive to domestically ship them. They're just sort of like logistics nightmares. They're also giant money sinks, because as I've mentioned, most of the time, and ours are definitely like this, Kickstarter campaigns, they ask for a certain funding amount, but you usually need far, far more than you're asking for, right? So you might see a funding goal of a board game that says $10,000, but the real cost after everything is figured in, it's probably closer to 40. And so the margins are super slim, right? So there are a lot of factors that went into it. And here we are. Convictor Drive is the start of this new direction for LionWing, and I couldn't be more excited to be sort of kicking that off with Convictor Drive. I will also say that what kind of gave me the motivation is, we launched another TTRPG campaign last fall for a role-playing game called Picaresque Roman, a Requiem for Rogues. Now, mind you, there have been plenty of other Japanese tabletop role-playing games that have come before Picaresque, right? The Ryutamas and Shinobigamis and Kamigakiris and all those of the world, right? Like, those existed. They have followings. They have sold well. They had successful Kickstarters, that kind of thing. So clearly, like, there's a market for it. But for me, I had never ventured into the Japanese TTRPG space, and so last fall when we did Picaresque Roman, it was one of those things where I was like, we're gonna see if, like, are there people for this? Like, do people want this product? And they did. People showed up for the campaign, but more importantly, after the campaign, we went on, and the game has become sort of our best. Not sort of. It is our best seller. So that to me was kind of like a clear message to say, no, people want to play these games, and I've got the ability to allow them to play it. I want to shed a spotlight on all of the Japanese RPGs that people want to play but can't because of the language barrier. I want to be the person that facilitates that localization process and then getting those games over to the West. So here we are. Convictor Drive, if you haven't heard, is from the same group that did our last TTRPG localization project. So Group SGR are the designers behind Picaresque Roman, and they're the designers behind Convictor Drive. What is Convictor Drive? Well, it is a Kamen Rider, tokusatsu-inspired TTRPG from Japan about trauma, heroics, and big power suits. That's the elevator pitch. That's like the super fast going up just one floor elevator pitch. It's much more complicated than that, though. Yes, it's a tokusatsu-inspired game about, big action, big villains, big battles, all that good stuff, but it's also got this very human element behind it that is integral to the lore, but also the mechanics and how you play the game, and that is, characters grappling with trauma and sort of this larger commentary on, like, what do we do with trauma? How do we work through it? Because trauma is a quagmire, right? And so this game, I think, tackles that subject and looks at the mental health side of things that is very appealing to me just based on what I do in my day job, but also just appealing as a human being. All of that is relatable, at least it is to me. And so here we are with Convictor Drive. We've been on Kickstarter for 3.5 days now. So, and last time I checked, we were coming in close to maybe 32,000 dollars funded so far, which we have never gotten to $32,000 in 3.5 days. That has not happened for us before. So that's been something new. Really super exciting, as you can imagine. But that's been new. I'll tell you what else has been super new about this campaign that I just absolutely love, and that is the folks who have come on board and who have come to be a part of the LionWing community. So I have said for a long time, like, the LionWing community is just incredible. You know, I started this Discord back in 2018, I guess, and even then we had a bunch of really cool people part of the community. But as the company has grown, so too has the community, and so too has the Discord. And you always wonder, I always wonder anyway, as something like that grows, like, oh, you know, just like statistically speaking, as more people become aware and like join, we're bound to get, like, you know, some bad apples. We never really have, though. Everyone who's been a part of the LionWing community has been super awesome, super kind, super welcoming. And so when we started this Convictor campaign, there was sort of like a flood of new folks who came into the Discord, who joined the community. And I was really interested to see what that was going to be like. You know, anytime that we've launched a project in the past, we get some new folks. You know, we always push like our Discord because we do want to build a community. I think communities are important. We always get some folks, you know, join the community with each of these projects. However, we've never had as many folks join the community all at once because of a project like we have with Convictor Drive. So that has been new as well. And I'll tell you what, the new folks who have joined the server are just awesome. Like, there's been so much enthusiasm and engagement and just like genuine excitement for this game that, you know, as someone who's on, like, you know, on the other side of things, like, it's super heartwarming to me. But it's also super awesome to see the veterans of the community mixing with the new folks of the community, the new blood. And it's just been really awesome to watch the interactions and that level of engagement that's happening for Convictor Drive that hasn't happened for any of our previous projects in the Discord has been super cool to see folks just talking about, you know, the type of campaign that they might want to be a part of, or that they might run if they're hoping to GM a campaign, or the type of character that they're gonna role play, or just talking about whatever, talking about Kamen Rider, Ultraman, or Super Sentai. I mean, we're talking about anything and everything, and it's been super awesome. And my throat is kind of dry. Hold on, about to cough. I am sick. In case you missed it. I was very sick in the quick little thank you update I did. I think it was our first night on Kickstarter. I like recorded the 3-minute video. Oh, I was sick as hell. I'm less sick now, but I'm still sick, so I might have to drink this and cough sometimes. I apologize. I'll try to hit the mute button because coughing also does not make for good audio, I hear. Anyway, so like, the community's been awesome. So that brings us to tonight, like, what it is I'm doing here. I'm here to talk about Convictor Drive. So how did Convictor Drive come about? And by the way, if you are in the chat and you've got questions, this is the time to do it. I'm reading the chat the whole time. I've got chat pulled up on my second screen here, and I will answer those questions as they come in. I'll also pull up Discord here. I think we had some questions here. So Convictor Drive. I had a feeling before we went to Kickstarter for Picaresque Roman last year, I was like, are people gonna be into this? Like, is there an audience for this? Are people gonna like this thing? Especially Picaresque Roman, I was like, really, like, are people gonna like this? Because it's like it's a killer game, but it's also weird, right? It's a PvPvGM, sort of like social deduction with some board gamey elements type of role playing game. That's all narrative driven, and there's no real crunch, and there's no like moving figures on a combat board. There's none of that. So it's all theater of the mind. I'm like, are people going to like this at all? But even with those thoughts, I knew because the experience with Picaresque Roman was so good, and a lot of that has to do with Noelle, who I think is a part of the chat. She was the translator on Picaresque Roman, but the experience was so good, and the book was so good, and Group SGR, the designers, were so nice. I kind of had it in my head of like, I want to do more. So I was already looking around before Picaresque went live. I was already kind of looking around at like, what do I want to do next? And I knew for the next project, this project now, I wanted something a little bit more traditional than Picaresque. You can only have like one Picaresque in like your games catalog, I think, as a company. Or at least you can only have one Picaresque in your games catalog as a company. And then you have to put a bunch of games after it. And then maybe you can come back to another game like it. So I knew that for the follow-up project, I wanted something that was a bit more traditional, a little bit more mainstream in that regard, but at the same time, I did not want it to be a copycat of anything else that was out there. And so I was looking around, and, you know, I finally realized one day, like, hold on a second. Group SGR has a ton of stuff in their portfolio. Let me just look at the other things that are happening here. And Group SGR, they've got like 12 works to their name. And they do TTRPGs. They also do murder mysteries. So not all 12 of those are applicable because I'm not trying to do murder mysteries right now, although I love murder mysteries. I just think they're a tough sell. So they had this, you know, more than a handful of other works. Looked at Convictor Drive, thought this looks awesome. Did my research, talked to Sigre-san, the writer, the designer, and decided this is the game. I love that I love its premise. I love its world. It's a very unique setting. I like that it has combat this time around. That's a bit more traditional, but that the whole game, combat included, is it's deep, but never at the cost of accessibility. The whole game has just enough depth to give you lots of options, but it never gives you too many options. It's never too deep where you get into this place of analysis paralysis. And I talked about this in my interview on the Midgardy RPG podcast with Garn Breaker. But that's what really attracted me to the game. Because I was like, this is something that anyone can play. And by the way, I fucking love Ultraman. Like, and this is Ultraman. And then I did some more research and I talked to Sigre-san, and Sigre-san was like, yeah, there's definitely Ultraman in there. It's a little bit more like Kamen Rider, but there's Ultraman in there. If that's the thing that you need to get on board with localizing this game of ours, yeah, it's Ultraman. But no, seriously, there's a lot of Ultraman in this game. And so, you know, the premise, the narrative backdrop, the mechanics, already knowing Group SGR, already liking Sigre-san, and me personally liking the subject matter and liking what it did with these very real connectable themes, I decided, all right, this is the one. This is how I'm moving forward. This is going to be our next TTRPG. So that's how it kind of came about. I wish there was more intentionality behind Convictor Drive, but really I was like, I don't know what I want next. I'm just going to start looking around. Group SGR is right in front of me. Let me look at their other stuff. Oh shit, I like this game. Okay, that's going to be the one. Now, I typically do work in that way. Like once I find the thing that I like, I don't continue looking. I'm very much like that in like all aspects of my life, but I compare it to how I pick out birthday cards for people. You know, you go to Target or wherever that you pick out your birthday cards and you're like, there are so many fucking birthday cards here. What do I do with all of this information? I don't know how to process this much data. For me, I'm like, all right, I'm just going to keep reading these cards. And the first one that makes me laugh, that's the one I'm picking. Well, I'm the same way with games. Got all of these games available. Where do I even start? I'm like, well, I'll just pick this one and I'll start with it. And if it doesn't resonate with me, I'll go to the next one. And the first one that resonates with me, that's the one. I'm not going to keep looking. I'm not going to try to find something better. No, I've already found my better right there. So that's kind of my process. I got my first question in the chat from Kaiju Stew. Any chance you can hit at what other TRPGs might happen in the future? Let me take a sip of my drink. I'll try not to slurp it because that also doesn't make for good audio. I don't think most people drink do most people drink on stream? I don't know. Hopefully I'm not turning people away by drinking on stream. Okay. a hint. So here's my concern about giving a hint. I feel like the next project of ours might be a little obvious. So I'm afraid that if I give a hint, and I'm trying to like really think of like some backward hint that would not give away what it is. I really feel like any hint that I gave about what the project is would people would know it immediately. So let me come back to that. I will come back to that. I see Rogues in the chat. Yes, LionWing Talks is back. Yep. So I will answer. So we got another question in the chat here. King Neketsu. I will totally answer that question here in a second, but I shared this in one of the interviews that I did in the lead up, talking about like, I think the interviewer was asking like, well, what drew you to this game or whatever. And as I mentioned before, I like Ultraman a lot, right? So growing up, I was born in the 80s, grew up in the 90s. So the Super Nintendo was kind of my thing. My brother, who was 6 years older, had a Super Nintendo. He one day, and we didn't get a lot of games back then. We didn't have a ton of money, so like we rarely got games. We'd get like one game and play it to death for 8 months. I think like our total like SNES collection for like the span of 2 years was like Street Fighter 2, Batman Returns, and Ultraman, which I think came out in like 91 or 92 or something. And I don't know why my brother picked out Ultraman, because like knowing my brother, that's not a pick that he would normally pick. But anyway, he picked it out. So he would have been 12, I guess, at the time, 12 or 13. Anyway, he comes home, and if anyone's played Ultraman for SNES, it's a fighter. But he brought it home. I never heard of Ultraman. I'm 6 years old, and I don't think Power Rangers was a thing yet. I think it was about to be a thing like the following year, 92, 93. I think was the first season of Mighty Morphin Power Rangers. Anyway, he brought it home, and he played it for like an hour and was like, "This game's garbage." Like, what did I do? Why did I choose this game? So he was like, "Bradley, if you just want to play this game, I don't ever really want to play this game again." So I'm like, I'm 6 years old. I'm like, hell yeah, I want to play that game. I'll play any game. We've been playing Batman Returns for like 6 months. I'm kind of over Batman Returns. Give me, yeah, sure, let's do it. And so I played the hell out of that game and kind of fell in love with it. And I really only had access to Ultraman through that game for the longest time. It's not like Ultraman was super accessible in the 90s. And so I just played a lot of Ultraman. And so that's kind of how I fell in love with Ultraman. So I'm looking at, so someone asked me in this interview that I'm also talking about, I think they asked me the hardest question. They were like, let's see here. Yes, it says, of course, we took a moment to ask Hailstorm what his favorite Kamen Rider series is. Unsurprisingly, he opened with a groan, which I did. And I said, ugh, this is the hardest question yet. If I had to pick one right now, I'd say Build. So I like Build a whole lot, but I mean, I like several series. I like Amazon Riders a lot. I mean, I don't know. I hate favorite questions. They're the worst. Let me come back to that. Yeah, I'll take any birthday card. Whoever just said that. Okay, let me keep up with the chat here because I'm not paying attention. Noel, I feel like if you're talking about Japanese tabletop games, saying it would be too obvious, maybe. Hint enough. I know. I thought about that. I said that out loud, and I was like, that's not good. That's not good at all. Let's see here. Rogue. Hey, Rogue. I'm glad you appreciate my arc spread back there. I've been getting into collecting laser discs. That's been a thing for me. I kind of stopped collecting video games because that just felt like a bit of a rat race. But laser discs is kind of my thing right now. Anyway, catching up. The Adventures of Ultraman movie was my favorite Ultraman related thing growing up, and the only thing I could ever find. Yeah, Rogue, I don't know like in what decade you grew up, but I felt very similar. And I remember loving Ultraman as a kid, and then like asking my mom, and of course my mom has no fucking idea what Ultraman is. I'm like, Mom, can I watch Ultraman? Like, can I get Ultraman toys? Now, eventually, Toys R Us did end up selling Ultraman toys, and I got Ultraman toys, which was cool as hell. But yeah, it was one of those things where like I found this property that I absolutely adored, and I couldn't indulge in it fully, which was a total bummer until I found those toys. That was pretty cool. So you grew up in the 80s. So you were born in the 80s, grew up in the 90s. Yes, just like me. Perfect. Okay. So check some things. Got a couple questions here. So Hero dropped these questions in the LionWing Talks channel, which, by the way, if you ever want to hear me answer a question on a show like this, you can always drop it in the channel in our Discord called LionWing Talks. So his question is, he's got a couple questions here. What is your favorite part of Convictor Drive overall? So my favorite part, so I like my, here we are with the favorite stuff again. I'm really bad at this. I'm bad at committing, folks. I'm really bad at committing. So I like that, trauma is such a central part of the game. I like how it's utilized in its gameplay mechanics. I think it's a really creative way to have the players engage with the game world and with their characters. I think because trauma is so central to the experience, I think it allows you to interact with the other characters and your own in ways that you would not be able to otherwise. Sure, you might be able to explore traumas, and plenty of players do in their role-playing game campaigns. But how it's explored in Convictor Drive is just kind of a little different. And so while you could explore those themes, and plenty of people do in other games, I'm not sure it's done in the same type of way as it's done with Convictor Drive. Now, some of that is like the setting itself and the narrative premise behind what trauma does for the Convictor suits and how they're powered. You know, they're effectively powered by trauma, by the operator's trauma, which I just think is really, it's a fascinating way to go about having your characters possess and exhibit strength, which I love the commentary that exists in that interaction. Because trauma can be so, like real life trauma can be so debilitating, it's really great that this game looks at trauma as a way for characters to process it by having to experience it, and then turn that experience into strength so that they can grow and ultimately overcome the trauma. So, you know, in the game, like in the lore itself, players are employees of Drive Private Security. And the only way that you can operate a Convictor suit, Convictor armor, is to be a Drive operator. And of course, the only way that you can get to the point where you can operate the Convictor itself is you have to have the prerequisite of having some kind of significant loss. But the lore states that Drive wants its operators to eventually be able to reconcile their trauma, even though once an operator reconciles their trauma, they no longer experience the emotional burst that they get from re-experiencing that trauma, and therefore can no longer pilot the Convictors. And so they sort of graduate out of being Convictor pilots. Now they can, after that, go work in other parts of Drive if they want, or they can leave Drive entirely. But so there is this idea in mind that, you know, the characters are not, they're not saddled with having to have trauma. indefinitely. And I think that's an important message. And that as we work through our trauma, we try to reconcile as much as possible from it. And hopefully from that we grow. And that's kind of what the game is getting at as well. So I love that, yes, Convictor Drive is a game first and foremost before anything else. But it's also got important messaging. All right, let me see here. Yeah, so Churcher says, yes, I love that part of the game. Overcoming trauma is celebrated. Sure, the character retires, but I love that it's a thing. Yeah, I like that, that kind of making it through to the other side of trauma, which sometimes seems insurmountable, is celebrated in the game. Now, you could say there's kind of like this more slimy side to Drive, in that the minute that they have no further use of their pilots, they just sort of discard them, and they do it under the guise of, celebration of having reconciled this really traumatic event. But I'm more of an optimist, and so I like to see it as it's being celebrated as well by Drive. So someone in the chat said, could we get more information about the Deviators and their parent company's relationship with Drive? Yeah, so I actually, let me pull something up here. I was going to, in last night's Kickstarter update, I was going to talk about Deviators. In fact, I wrote the, let's see here. I wrote the whole post on Deviators before deciding, wait a second, I should probably lay the groundwork by talking a little bit about like generic exoframes and then going a bit more in depth about the Convictors before I get to the Deviators. So I just copy and pasted my whole post about Deviators into a draft doc in my Gmail, and then I'm going to be posting about the Deviators in the next big update. I don't know if I'll do a long update tonight and tomorrow. Typically on the weekends, I try to make the updates a little lighter, a little fluffier, because I know people aren't as interested in being strapped to their phones on the weekend. So I try to keep that in mind. But anyway, so yes, there's a rival company in the Yokohama zone called BDS. And BDS, excuse me. Let me pull this up as well real quick. One moment. BDS is, it stands for Balanced Delivery Service. They were formerly like a weapons contractor or defense contractor. They worked in the defense industry and kind of specialized in the development and provisioning of weapons systems. However, along the way, they sort of fell into some unethical practices for a variety of reasons, and I don't want to spoil all of the lore, but they decided that they wanted a little piece of the pie too. You know, the Convictors are a big deal in the Yokohama zone. Now, Convictors are only in the Yokohama zone, while exoframes, like the general exoframes, they've been distributed to the general population, all pockets of the world, whatever. Convictors are not. Convictors are still not like experimental, because they're not experimental really any longer, but they're not at a point to where they're going to be, that technology is going to be given and used outside of the Yokohama zone. However, within the Yokohama zone, obviously Drive is a big deal. They've got a big piece of the pie. I mean, they partner with the Yokohama police. They do some partnering with the Japanese military. BDS said, hold on a second, we want to do that too. But because they're a little bit more ethically ambiguous, to be nice about it, I would say, their construction of the Deviators were not as regulated and were not as operator friendly. In fact, to operate a Deviator, the pilot actually is effectively harmed in the process. To be able to operate a deviator, they get hurt operating it. So there's no regard for the actual pilot of a deviator, just by how it's designed. Also, deviators are a lot more volatile, and therefore they're a lot more dangerous. They can match convictors. They can match the power of a convictor suit, but they can also exceed. So in many ways, they're actually stronger than convictors. So the zone isn't like a huge area. I mean, it's big enough. You know, it's a big city, but it's not like, you know, it's still a city. So the amount of destruction that can occur between deviators and convictors is quite immense. And I'm excited to see how players and GMs, how campaigns evolve over time to incorporate the interplay between deviators and convictors, yes, but also the interplay between deviators and the rest of the zone. I kind of want to save the rest of the deviator lore for the update. But let me just go through here, see if there's anything else that I want to pick from my post to share with you. Okay, yeah, so here, I'll say this. Here's an excerpt from my post. The difference between deviators and convictors is that deviators will supply pilots trauma on the spot by torturing their pilots or even injecting them with certain drugs. So the more that a deviator pilot uses their pseudo ring system, the greater the danger they expose themselves to is. So it's not fun being a deviator pilot, I think, is the point here. Now, it's not sunshine and rainbows either being a convictor pilot, because you do have to experience your trauma to be able to get the most out of your suit, out of your armor. But it's not actively hurting the pilot the entire time. Deviators are. So I love that. I like how wicked that is. Like, it makes you wonder what would cause someone to pilot a deviator, right? You could say, well, sure, maybe some of the information about how the deviator and how it works is withheld from the pilot, but you would also assume that just through sheer like person power, they wouldn't have enough people just constantly cycle out pilots after one use of a deviator. So someone might go into a deviator not knowing to expect. They pilot the deviator, it's hell. The encounter is over. They leave the suit, but then they come back for a second mission at some point, knowing just what it is they're about to walk into. I want to get into the mind of the person that does that. What would motivate them? Someone in the chat says money is a powerful motivator. Yeah. The fine line between justice and vengeance. Yeah, I mean, perfectly put, Neketsu. So I think there are some real opportunities there for character exploration. Which power is a powerful motivator? Yeah, it is, Fern. I mean, it is. All of those things are powerful motivators. I just think about, the trauma being created in real time by torturing the pilot. I mean, maybe I'm just more well-adjusted than the average deviator pilot, but I'm just thinking like all the money and power in the world wouldn't be enough for me to get in that fucking suit. I mean, I'm not doing that. I am not doing that. So cool roleplay opportunities there, I think. Retro, of course you would say this, retro. Not going to lie, the way you describe deviators makes me want to play one. Perhaps you need to rewrite that bio about old sleeves, make him a deviator pilot, which I still haven't read, but I will tonight. I really didn't have much time to like engage with the Discord at all today. So I've got a bunch of stuff to read through, because I do actually read everything that goes through the Discord. I do read. If I don't read it in real time, I go back through and it is my bedtime reading. Let's see here. Fern, people will hurt themselves to feel control for a fleeting moment, coming back each time for that rush. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it could be as simple as that, right? It could be as simple as money. It could be as simple as control and power and all of that. But then I want to examine, like, I want to examine the person then who values control more than the pain that they have to put themselves through to ascertain that level of control. Like that is a character worth examining, worth analyzing, I think anyway. Yeah, hurt people do hurt people sometimes. Not all the time, but sometimes. Yeah. What about freedom? Time as a deviator reduces prison sentence. Yeah, now that's interesting. So that's not really talked about in the lore, but that absolutely could be a part of the lore of the campaign that you play. So this is why I like RPGs in general, but it's especially why I like Convictor, because there are some really unique themes that I think players will get to explore that they may not really have the space to in other games, because like some themes just cannot be explored given the setting. I mean, they could be, but maybe it wouldn't make a whole lot of sense. But this gives folks the opportunity to tackle, I think, some tough subjects that need to be discussed. And so I think the conversations that could be had, during, but, hopefully after that session is over, leads to important bonding moments for the players behind those characters. Yes, it's the characters who are experiencing these traumas. But, in my experience anyway, players are not they're not all that removed from players are not all that removed from the characters they play in RPGs. In fact, there is a little section in this book that talks about the importance of a debrief in this game specifically, because it does deal with sensitive subjects, and that a debrief, I think debriefs are the games that I GM, I always debrief in. The games that I like to play in, I like having a debrief afterwards. So I'm biased when I say this, but I think this game especially benefits from a debrief after the session is over. Let's see here. King, it's a good point. Damn, the concept of this game alone is getting increasingly philosophical. I love it. Yeah, I mean, like I said, once I really started digging into this, it's really why I didn't need to go and pick up another birthday card, so to speak. Like, I knew this was the one. I knew this, like, it wasn't going to get better than this for this project, for the next project after Picaresque. So, because I do like all of the areas that you can really explore, that the premise of the game allows you to explore. Okay. Here I had some other questions here in Discord. Come for the tokusatsu, stay for the feels. Yeah. Yeah. All right, I'm going to pour myself another drink while I read this question. From Hero, who was one of the players in our actual play, which, if you're watching this right now and you haven't checked out the actual play on the campaign page, please do. We've got a couple people here in the chat who are part of that actual play, Churcher and Jake. Thank you again, folks, for that actual play. I just kind of approached them in the lead up to Convictor Drive because I knew, I don't know, Jake, if I knew you played RPGs, but I knew Churcher did. And because he led the community game of Picaresque Roman. If I remember correctly, Churcher was the GM of the community game. And so I reached out to Churcher and was like, hey, you want to GM this game? I can give you the whole book before anyone else knows about it. And I think Churcher was like, yeah, sign me up. So thank you for doing that. Okay. So that's just this sound. That's just this sound. By the way, Retroflow says, seriously, guys, the actual play was so good. You guys need to give yourselves a pat on the back. Yeah, so here's the problem. Here's the problem with the folks in the actual play and them and it being so good. I talk about this in my 9 to 5 with my staff who like are really proficient, effective, efficient staff. Like sometimes you can be too good, right? Because when you're really good at what you do, you get called on a lot because you're trusted, right? Because like you do the job really well. And the people who don't do the job as well don't get called on as much. Therein lies the problem. Churcher, Jake, the rest of the folks who were a part of that. Now, because it was so good, the next RPG, you're going to inevitably get, you're gonna get the DM. Hey, Churcher, you want a GM for me again? Jake, you want to be a character again? So, little did you know that you are now locked in for life for LionWing actual plays. Okay. Wow, this is good. So I shared this before we went on stream. Little Jack Daniels, Winter Jack. Woo. Tennessee cider. Getting the holiday spirit with some holiday spirits. Okay, so Jake says, what are you most excited to see out of the community when the game finally releases? Is it character bios, stories of people's campaigns, suit customization, combos, etc.? For me, the thing that I'm most excited to hear about are the stories. It's what draws me to RPGs. Is the storytelling element of it. You know, for like as long as humans have been humans, like we've been storytellers. Even when we didn't have language, we were storytellers, right? Like storytelling is in us. It's deep in us. There's like real history with storytelling, and I think storytelling is really important. I think it's powerful. I think it allows us to explore the world around us, but maybe more importantly, it allows us to explore ourselves. Even if we are not playing ourselves, we are playing a character. Like I said before, so much of us is in our characters. Even if we don't want them to be, even if we don't think any of us is in a character, we are always very much so in our characters somewhere. And the ability to tell our story, be it our character story that is fictitious, or our character story that we're saying is fictitious, but is actually a parallel to our own personal story, is that's powerful stuff to me. So I don't really care about hearing about people's like loadout combos and stuff. Like that's a part of the game and that's cool. Like I enjoy doing that as a character. But the thing I want to hear about, I want to hear about the stories. I want to hear about how campaigns went. I want to hear about the conversations that were had after the session's over and how people felt. How people felt about what happened in the game. I think part of why I like storytelling so much is, storytelling is evocative and it pulls emotions out of us. I think we're at our best when we're understanding our emotions. And so I want to know like what this game is doing to people emotionally. And I want to know if it's helped them, for instance. I think TTRPGs are extremely therapeutic. I think this game especially is therapeutic. Now, this game might be a little bit scarier. Like if you yourself have trauma in your history, I think this game can be a little scary initially. Because although you might write your character's trauma that's very different than yours, it's still someone is still confronting trauma and you may not be ready to do it yourself. But I want to know how if this game helps facilitate growth and not just characters. I want to know if the people behind the characters also level up from their experiences in the game. Okay. So Church said, I kind of wish we had recorded that. I'm assuming the debrief, but ultimately that's something that's a bit more private. So I'm glad we did it. Yeah. I think that's probably, the right call there. I'm glad to hear that a debrief happened. That's cool. So, Hero, to answer your question, that's the thing that gets me the most excited. Okay. Look at Fern. Fern. The consummate gun and gun salesperson. Just constantly pushing gun and gun whenever the opportunity arises. I love it, Someone's got to. Fern is gun and gun. If gun and gun was a person, it would be Fern. Absolutely. I mean, he's got the Discord title to prove so. Okay. Back to questions here. So, Friznak, which I think is Frank. Sorry if I'm misremembering Frizz. I don't think I am, though. Any plans for an online league of sorts for Convictor Drive? So, I don't know how an online league would work for Convictor Drive. However, as someone said right after that question, I think it would be cool to see an ongoing campaign of like an online ongoing campaign of Convictor Drive that people could tune into, once a month or once every couple weeks. I think that'd be really fun. Sort of like just a watch along of the community playing this, this longer form campaign of Convictor Drive. That'd be a lot of fun. I would love to see that. That requires a lot of things, right? Like getting people together to play an RPG is like moving mountains sometimes. I think about that meme when the D&D movie was was delayed, and all the headlines that came out about that delay, discussing how it mirrored real life D&D of how you're having to constantly reschedule and shift around schedules to make the next game. So it might be hard to get people on a consistent basis to do that. But if that could happen, I would love to have a viewing party for that kind of thing. Okay. Someone said in the chat, seems this Kickstarter is going great. Yeah. This has been really awesome to see this Kickstarter and to see the level of support and excitement around it. It was interesting. In the lead up to the Kickstarter, there was a lot of chatter and enthusiasm that just did not exist for any of our previous campaigns. And we didn't run like the typical pre-campaign like ad campaign, if you will, where you see an ad on Facebook, you click it, it takes you to the Kickstarter landing page, and all you have to do is click a button to say, notify me when it launches, right? We didn't do that. You clicked on the ad, it took you to a landing page that you had to read a bunch of stuff about the game if you wanted to, but you had to like actually type in your email address. Typically, you get less of a response for that kind of ad campaign than you would someone just clicking a button, because clicking a button is so much easier. You wouldn't think like, oh my gosh, it takes like 6 seconds to type in an email address, but like, every second of someone's day is precious. And oftentimes when I got to put in my email address to sign up for something, I just don't do it. So it's really hard to collect like emails for this type of pre-Kickstarter ad campaign. But we had like almost 1,600 signups before we went live, which is insane for an email campaign like that. So already I was like, oh, I think people are excited about this. But I wasn't, I wasn't quite ready for how excited they were going to be for it. So as the person who, who's setting all this up and is the one who picks these things, and you just kind of hope that, like, I hope people like this. it's really cool to see like, oh, okay, people see in this game what I saw in it too. That's really awesome. So I suspected that people would like it, but the turnout has been really quite overwhelming. There, yeah, someone in the chat said there was a lot of Facebook engagement too, from what I saw. There was a lot of positive engagement. Like sometimes you'll get people, like I'm thinking of some of our previous campaigns, like Gun and Gun, of people just kind of like being people on the internet. I don't think there was one instance of that this time around, not one. And even with Gun and Gun, it's not like we got a lot of that, but we certainly got some of it. There was none this time around. So like this was just like altogether a very positive pre-launch experience. But also, you know, the RPG scene is just different. It's got it's a different group of folks, and they engage differently. And I saw that, right? So then they show their enthusiasm differently, and they show their respect differently, and it's a really great group of folks, which is part of why I like being a part of the scene so much myself, like as a player, like in my local scene so much, because it's just a really welcoming corner of the tabletop scene, and not all corners, as we know, of the tabletop scene are super welcoming. So, all right. Retroflow says a community storyline with rotating COs would be so good. Yes, it would be. Someone should maybe do that. Jake said we could rotate people in and out. Absolutely, yeah. I think you could. I think there are definitely ways to get around like the scheduling, and not everyone can make every single session problem. I'd love to see it, folks. I'd love to see it. I could offer some incentives to make it happen if that's what it has to come to. Because I really would like to see it that much. Okay, some more questions. Now, Retro, you asked 4 questions that had nothing to do with Convictor Drive. Like, did you not get the memo, Retro? Come on. But I'll answer them anyway. I'm just kidding. I think in the Convictor Drive update last night, I said that you could ask about anything. So I mean, like, you're technically following the rules. But kind of not, right? Kind of not. Number 1, ignoring pesky things like budgets and licensing. What is your absolute number 1 drop everything in progress to work on a dream project? I would say that my number 1 dream project is already in the contract signing stage. But one, like, a dream project that I would love to get, that I clearly haven't because I'm going to talk about it, is the Record of Lodos War TTRPG. That would be one that I would love to. That would be a dream project for me because of how much I love Record of Lodos War. You know, it pained me. So behind this Muv-Love poster is the Record of Lodos War poster that I had in the background of these LionWing talks for so long. It kind of pained me to put this one over top of it, but I needed the pop of color first off, but I love Muv-Love, and I needed a little bit of a change of scenery. I didn't want to come back to LionWing talks looking the same as I did a year ago. So here we go. Every Lodos game book looks and is so cool. I just... Question here in the chat. So initially I thought the Kickstarter was supposed to launch on the 1st, but it kept getting pushed back. Definitely glad it's out now, but why the delay? The delay was for a couple reasons. We initially were not going to do the box set, the collector's box set. We were going to run a bit more of a, excuse me. We were going to run a bit more of a, I don't know, more of an economical campaign. It was going to be pretty lean. But 2 things changed that. One was the enthusiasm for the game in the pre-campaign or the pre-Kickstarter ad campaign, which made me think, hold on a second. I wonder, because there is so much enthusiasm, if people are going to want to, if they're going to want more than just the book. And two, not right before, but, you know, in the month leading up to the release of Convictor, we were fulfilling our other TTRPG project. And we were getting a ton of messages and even some stuff in Discord and on social of people loving the box set of Picaresque Roman, which is that one there. So it was like, hold on a second. You know, we're working with the same printer again. People love the previous box set. There's a ton of enthusiasm for this product. People are probably going to want more than just a book. Not everyone, but some people will. Hold on a second. We need to pause this and we need to recalibrate a little bit so that we can meet expectations of what people will have of the campaign and the rewards. And damn, if people liked the last one, let's do it again. So that played into it big time. We were also, another thing is, initially we were fulfilling Picaresque Roman. We were also fulfilling one of our other projects at the same time. By the way, so we fulfilled Embryo Machine and Picaresque Roman at the same time. If you ever want to do this, like if you ever want to like publish board games, do the Kickstarter thing, let me tell you how much you should never fulfill two projects at the same time. So on the outside, it probably looked like everything went off perfectly. So we needed to fulfill those projects before Kickstarter would approve our campaign. But when we were going through the approval campaign, or when we were going through the approval process with Kickstarter, they have like a new outreach and games engagement team at Kickstarter, you know, because they have new leadership there or whatever. So things have changed internally, their structures changed internally. And mind you, in the past, when I've asked for approval of each campaign, I've never heard from anyone. You know, like I submit the approval and then like, whatever, 3 to 7 days later, I just log into my Kickstarter and then like, boom, up pops a message like, oh, your project's been approved. Okay, like never talked to anyone. This time with Convictor, someone emailed me and was like, hey, a bunch of us on the approval team thinks this looks really cool. We want to feature this as a project we love. Can you, once you fulfill your projects, like when do you want to launch this thing? Because we need to do some things on our end to ensure we're able to give you the project we love title, and that has an algorithm all of itself, and so like we need to be able to plan for that. So it was another one of those moments where I'm like, okay, I think people are gonna like this game. And we had already pivoted to like we're gonna offer more rewards, but it was one of those moments where it's like the decision to pivot and provide a more robust backer experience with more rewards. It was a validating moment for even Kickstarter to say like, this is a cool project. So I was like, I'm glad we pivoted. I'm glad we delayed things because this is going to work out for the best, I think. And I think it has. Okay, what's going on in the comments? What did I miss? Retro says, as an anime fan, I'm ashamed to admit I've never seen Lodos War. I may need to rectify that soon. Yeah, I mean, I would change that, and I'd probably say I may need to rectify that like tonight would be my suggestion. It's so good. Like if you like 90s anime, to me, like Lodos is the epitome of 90s anime. Well, like 90s fantasy anime, because I think I would probably say like the epitome of 90s anime would be like Ninja Scroll or Ghost in the Shell or Bubblegum Crisis or Evangelion or something like that. But Lodos is up there when it comes to like fantasy anime. But if you don't like 90s, if you don't like the aesthetics of 90s anime, you might not get into it because it's very 90s anime looking, which I love. I wish we could go back to that art style. We never will, and that's a shame. church. You've never seen it either? What are you guys doing with your lives? Sounds like a good opportunity for a community book club type thing where we all watch and discuss. So I am so down with that. We should do that. I want to be a part of that. We should do that. Let's do that. Let's do that. Okay, back to questions here. Question 2 from Retro. I know we're smack dab in the middle of Convictor Drive's campaign, but can you give us any hints for the next LionWing project? I think you came in late, Retro. And although I said I cannot give you a hint to the next project because it'll probably tell you what that next project is. And then someone pointed out, well, the fact that you said that's a hint in and of itself means that I'm not saying anything more about the answer to this question. So moving on. Question 3. What do you feel are LionWing's greatest strengths and weaknesses? We really care about the work we do. We're really passionate about it. We're really invested. I think we localize and publish stuff that other people would not take a chance on. I think we're willing to engage in ways that other companies maybe aren't or can't. It's kind of the beauty of being small and kind of being a one-person show. I mean, certainly I work on teams. Noelle, who was in the chat earlier, I don't know if she still is. She's a part of the team, and Winona's part of the team, and tons of people are part of each team. Sometimes I use the same people on teams, and other times I shift things up a little bit. But so it's not just me, but like running the company, yes, it's just me. And so it's nice when there's only one person in that regard, because you can shift pretty quickly, you can pivot pretty quickly, but you can also engage in ways that like bigger companies may struggle to. And because you're only one person, you can provide like individualized care to each, customer, backer, community member, whatever word you want to put on it. And I think that's like a real strength. I've seen a couple of people say something to the effect of like, oh, it's really cool that the developers are a part of the conversations here on Discord, or they provide this opportunity like LionWing Talks. And yeah, I think that is something cool that we can do that not everyone else does. Some people do it, don't get me wrong, and plenty of people do it. But we are one of those plenty of people who does it, and I think we do it okay. Weaknesses. Weaknesses are our timelines. I'm one person, and I don't have a team of people helping me with anything outside of development. On projects, tons of people are helping. Graphics people, translators, editors, proofreaders, right? Play testers, whatever. I got awesome people that I've worked with on projects. Noelle being one of them. But like literally, and I actually mean the word literally in its true definition, everyone who I've worked with on our projects is awesome. And that's why, while not every team is the same, I kind of come back to each team member in some regard. So from like the operations end, it's just me, and I'm only one person, and this is a side job. I do it at night. And even more than that, I don't like do it at night. Like, oh, I come home from my day job, I eat dinner, and then I start this at 6 o'clock. No, I come home from my day job. Like, I play with my kids. I go to my son's taekwondo practice. I have dinner. I put my kids down. I hang out with my wife. And then I come downstairs, and then I start doing LionWing work. And by the way, I got to be up again at 6 o'clock because I know my son's going to get me up at 6 o'clock. So like, I can't work until 3 in the morning any longer, like I did on Testament or something like that when I was working until 3:30 in the morning. So I finally get downstairs at 9, 10, sometimes 10:30, like last night, and then I start working. So I'm only one person. Now, it's been super hard being one person on the business end in a COVID area with logistics being, as much of a mess as they have been. Fortunately, the logistics scene is not as bad as it was just a couple months ago. It's still bad, but it's not where it once was. But yeah, just so when you're only one person, you've got to like handle everything on the back end, on the administrative end, on the operations end. Yeah, it's challenging. And so that's definitely something that I'm always looking to grow and improve on. Last question from Retro. LionWing enhances English releases with content not found in the original versions. What's your favorite addition to a project, and why is it the linen finish on the cards for Wild Hunt Festival? It's most definitely not the linen finish cards in Wild Hunt Festival, which if you're new to watching this, let me just tell you now, I absolutely hate linen finish on cards. It makes me it makes me retch. I think I've put linen finish on only one project. I think. Did we do it on Testament? I don't think we did. We did it on Wild Hunt Festival. And I've got a confession to make, folks. First time you're hearing about it right now. I have not played Wild Hunt Festival since it went to mass production. So all the copies that y'all got, I've never played. Which is not uncommon. Usually by the time that a project gets to mass production, I never want to think about it again. Not because there's anything wrong with the game, but because, you know, it's like when you like eat a certain type of food, like a whole lot, and then one day you realize like, I'm not even enjoying this anymore. I think I actively hate this because I've been eating it so much. And then you never touch that food again, or you go like months or years before you touch it again. That's how I am with projects. At the very end, once we get to the mass production stage, I'm like, if I never see that project again, it'll be too soon. So part of my not playing the mass production copy of Wild Hunt Festival is just, that's my process. I work too much on it and I never want to see it again. And some of it, straight up, I don't want to touch those cards. They're linen finish. It's gross. It's gross. Linen finish is gross. Okay, so my favorite addition to a project. I like this question. I don't like favorite questions, but this one's maybe a little bit easier. Let me think. Favorite edition, running through the projects in my head that we've done. So it would probably be, and this is probably going to be a boring answer, but it's my answer. Probably the translation notes that we did for Picaresque Roman. That was, and for the Rogue edition of the book, you know, the deluxe edition of the book included some of our translation notes. And that's probably my favorite edition that we've done. I mean, I guess I could have said the Nightmare mode in Wild Hunt Festival, or the EX mode in Testament, or the Lone Wolf mode in Embryo Machine. Lone Wolf mode in Embryo Machine is pretty sweet. No lie. Nah, I'm still going to go with the translation notes. I think that's my favorite. Okay. Looking through, I think I've got to all the questions. Check the chat one more time. If anyone has any questions, this is your time to ask them. If not, I'm about to get off here because it's Friday night. I got this practically brand new bottle of Winter Jack ready to be consumed in my Pokemon cup with my vanilla Coke Zero. I got a question here. What genre do you feel is lacking in the TTRPG scene? Oh, you know, this would probably depend. The answer would probably change depending on who you talk to, just based on like what they surround themselves with. We typically surround ourselves with stuff we like. And so therefore you're probably not as able to see the collective whole because you're so close to all the stuff you like. So this answer might change depending on who you talk to. I think my answer would be, oh my gosh, there's so many genres neglected in the TTRPG scene. And at the same time, there's so much creativity in so many genres that are not neglected. And yeah, sure, there are plenty of genres that, you know, are well cared for. That garden is well taken care of and bountiful. And then there are others definitely that are withering. So for me, okay. So this is like a very probably a personal thing. I would like to see more. I would like to see more military horror RPGs. Yeah, military horror would be really cool to see. I think I shared on one of these. Someone asked like, "Oh, what's your favorite?" It was a genre question, like, "What's your favorite genre of movies?" And I said like military horror. I just like military horror a whole lot. You know, Predator, Aliens, that kind of thing. Even The Thing, to an extent. But yes, like Delta Green. Noel, yes. Yep. I'd like to see more of that. I'd like to see more... what's the name of that? One second. Let me look this up. There we go. Koriko. There was a Kickstarter campaign that just ended recently. I think it was a solo TTRPG called Koriko about like witches becoming a witch. I think the witch and apprentice genre is ripe for the picking. I think that'd be cool. A competitive cooking show TTRPG. That would be interesting. Noah said, my Driftwood brain barely remembered the translation notes, but I found them again, and yay, they're cool. They are. Noelle was primarily responsible for that whole translation notes section, and I loved it. Her write-ups and just getting a peek inside her brain was really cool for me personally, just because I find, you know, translators are they're cut from a different cloth. Their brain works in ways that that mine just doesn't. And so being able to peek into Noelle's process and then to be able to get that down on paper in words in the back of one of our books was really cool. So yeah, those translation notes, very neat. Church says, to help you, mine is Slice of Life. Sure, we got Ryutama, but that was released ages ago. We don't really get a lot of representation about that lately. And it's not everyone's cup of tea. Yeah, I think Slice of Life is cool. Absolutely. I think we're seeing, I think over the past couple years, we have seen a proliferation, or at least a growing interest in non-combat RPGs. And with non-combat comes the ability to do more slice-of-life stuff. Now, Ryutama, if I remember correctly, it's been a while, has combat, but how it handles combat's really unique. So there's definitely ways that you can do slice-of-life with combat. I would love to see slice-of-life with no combat. I'm sure that exists out there. I'm not recalling it quickly enough to know what the name of that or those games would be. I'm sure they exist. Yeah, I could definitely get down with some more slice of life stuff. I'm trying to think of Japanese TTRPGs that are of the slice of life variety. This is going to be some dead air here as I try to think on some stuff. And so this is the problem, because it's not an area of interest of mine. I'm rolling through all the books in my head that I've that I've scouted, that I've looked at and done research on. And of course, none of them are slice of life. So like, you know, immediately I'm like, well, there are none, but clearly there have to be. I just don't know them, because that's not what I would naturally seek out for one of our projects. But now that you mention it, it's got me thinking like, I wonder if there's an opportunity there. You know, I mean, that's the other part of what I do, is like I look for opportunities and, you know, holes to fill that other people are not filling. So that definitely could be one. Now I'm interested. There's a beginning idol. It's about being an idol. There's unsung. Okay, unsung duet. Yes, absolutely. Yes, absolutely. Unsung duet, which has a killer cover art. Which didn't the designer just recently release a free supplement to that? Like, as in just like 2 weeks ago. I think that's true. I'm fairly certain. I remember seeing the tweet, clicking on the link, and looking at it. Noel says yes, I think so. Yeah. We both can't be wrong, right? Clearly showing my lack of experience in the TTRPG genre, Jake says, or Hero, as I know him. I wouldn't have even assumed a slice of life RPG would have existed. Yeah, so you should check out Ryutama from Kodadama Heavy Industries did that one. Same folks that did the Shinobigami localization. Definitely check that out. Ryutama is really cool. In fact, Ryutama I have always just called Grandia, because it's basically Grandia, the TTRPG, even down to the color palette and the art style. So if you like Grandia and you like slice of life stuff that still has combat, Ryutama should be like one of your next purchases for sure. Well, the Grandia connection is something I can get behind. Yeah, no, it's I mean, it's really like Grandia. All you got to do is go to like Indie Press Revolution, which I think is the primary carrier of the physical book of Ryutama, and they recently did a restock, if I remember correctly. You can also go to DriveThruRPG and grab the PDF, but just go to one of those places, do a quick perusal of a couple pages, and you'll say like, oh yeah, this is Grandia. They just changed the name. Damn, I would love to do a Grandia or a Lunar. Or a Lunar TTRPG. In fact, they did a Lunar TTRPG based off the Magus system back in the late 90s. It was a TTRPG adaptation of Magical School Lunar for the Saturn. I have the book somewhere. It's one of those late 90s Magus systems where the books are about yay big. It's got some really horrible art in it. But anyway, I would love, Lunar would be awesome, Grandia would be awesome, and I think Gung Ho, right? They own the rights to both of those franchises, if memory serves. And you know, now that I'm thinking about this out loud, this is funny. I'm having this. You're seeing my process in real time. I know someone at Mastiff who does a lot of work with Gung Ho. I could probably reach out to Bill and have Bill reach out to Gung Ho and say, hey, we got someone interested in your Grandia and Lunar license for, strangely enough, a TTRPG adaptation. Would you be interested in talking to them? That would be interesting. So speaking of just sharing random tidbits of information, so about a year and a half ago, about a year and a half ago when we were wrapping up the Picaresque Roman stuff and I was thinking about what to do next, I reached out to Sunsoft to see if they would be interested in LionWing adapting the Albert Odyssey series to a TTRPG. I have the whole email chain. I could pull it up and share it on screen right now, where they were interested. In fact, I was the one who ultimately pulled back. They were so interested. We got into we were talking like numbers, and I mean, it was getting to the end of the negotiating process where I had somehow, convinced Sunsoft that allowing me to have the Albert Odyssey license to do a TTRPG was a great idea, which it was. And then I got cold feet. On it. It's one of the only projects that I've gotten to basically the end of the contract negotiations and pulled out of because of my own stuff, because I got nervous. I've only done that with one with one other game, with an ArcLight game, a board game a while ago. I was very early on when I first started this. But anyway, yeah, I got cold feet because I was like, first off, like, I don't even know who remembers Albert Odyssey. Like, there was one English game. It was on the Sega Saturn. I think it sold like 15,000 copies. I don't know if anyone's actually going to like be interested in a TTRPG adaptation of this really obscure JRPG that hasn't been around since the late 90s. But they were totally on board with it. In fact, so I went to them and I was like, hey, I want to make a TTRPG out of Albert Odyssey. And they were like, hey, that's a cool idea. What about just making a card game out of it? And so they spent like 3 emails trying to convince me to do a card game. and toward the end, I was kind of like, I think I want to do a card game. And then like, I was like, wait a second. No. I want to do a role-playing game. This is what I want to do. And they're like, okay, yeah, that's fine. Let's talk numbers. Anyway, this is me rambling. So that's the stuff that happens behind the scenes at LionWing. Okay, I just rambled about Albert Odyssey. And I bet there's about 3 people in the world who know of Albert Odyssey or like Albert Odyssey. And that none of those 3 people are here in this chat, would be my guess. Okay, let's see here. Yeah, so the designer of Unsung Duet is also, it sounds like a composer. Yeah, the theme song to Unsung Duet. Interesting. I love when people produce, of course I would love this because that's what we do. I love when people produce music for their tabletop games. So, speaking of, here's a fun fact about Convictor Drive. We tried to do a soundtrack for Convictor Drive as well. So most of our games have soundtracks. Oh God, you're gonna hear this pouring, which doesn't sound right. But so we tried to do a soundtrack for Convictor Drive, and I've been working with the same composer, D'Anthony, who's awesome. Oh, he's so good. And D'Anthony, who is like, he can do like anything I've ever thrown at him. He's like, yeah, I can tackle that, and he does it. So I'm like, hey, it's like, he's like, tell me about Convictor Drive, and I'm like, yeah, it's Tokusatsu's Kamen Rider Ultraman. He's like, oh, wow, okay. Can you give me some references of what you're thinking? Because that could mean a lot of things. So I sent him all these OPs. And he's like, I don't know if I could do this one. So we were like, well, let's just try one track. And like, if it doesn't work, it doesn't work. It's no big deal. And so we went back and forth a lot on this one track. And we just decided it wasn't going to work. It was kind of outside his wheelhouse, and I don't think he was super comfortable with the style of writing the style. And so then we just decided, you know what, maybe a soundtrack for this one isn't going to work out, just because Tokusatsu is it's more like band music heavy. And D'Anthony he's a composer, like classical stuff, right? Not that he can't write it, because what he wrote is actually quite good. I wonder if I have it. He'd probably kill me if I showed this to anyone. But he's not watching right now. So one of those situations of ask forgiveness rather than permission. This is what happens when you drink Jack Daniels on stream. You talk about and show people, previous contracts and unfinished trailer themes. Now I'm not finding it anywhere. Boo. Bummer, I'm just finding all the main night stuff. Okay, well, wasn't meant to be. He'd have killed me anyway. Yes, Churcher says, that's okay. Now we've got a community playlist. Yes, we do. I think Retro put that together. Retro says, yes, Bradley, drink more and spill more behind the scenes secrets. Retro, I think you were the one who was like, I love the inside baseball stuff. Was that you? I feel like you said that like a month ago in the Discord chat randomly. Maybe I'm misremembering. Maybe it's the booze talking. Churcher says, absolutely adore the PR soundtrack. Yeah, so D'Anthony did the Picaros Roman soundtrack as well. And the Embryo Machine soundtrack is really awesome. I really like that soundtrack. But the Picaros Roman is so eclectic and cool and like catches the vibe of Yakuza and Persona like so perfectly. So Fern says the Outward Odyssey Albert Odyssey Talk gets my hope up for a potential Resonance of Fate TTRPG. Dude, Fern, so like, I think just you and me, I think we're like 2 of 5 people in the world who know of and like Resonance of Fate. I should beat on the Tri-Ace door and say, hey, give me the Resonance of Fate license. I want to do a TTRPG with it. I mean, they probably need the money, right? I don't think Star Ocean, I don't think Star Ocean sold super well. I've seen those Famitsu sales charts. It didn't look like it sold super well in Japan. I hope it did better in the rest of the world. So they could probably use a little bit of royalty money right now. Dude, I liked Star Ocean too. It felt like a modern PS2 JRPG, which is basically all I'm really ever looking for in life anymore anyway. So I haven't finished it, unfortunately. I'm still making my way through Valkyrie Elysium. I think I'm like 1 chapter away from the end there. Someone in the chat said, Star Ocean hasn't been the same since 2. So I would agree. I think Star Ocean 2 is peak Star Ocean. But I will also say that I liked Till the End of the Time, even with the ending being what it is. And I liked Last Hope. I thought Last Hope was pretty decent. I thought it was I thought it was decent. Integrity and Faithlessness was, gosh, I hope there's no one in here that likes it. If so, like, this is just my opinion. If you like it, that's awesome. I'm glad for you. I just thought that game was like, so bad. Like, so bad. For me to not finish a Star Ocean game, it's the only Star Ocean game that I haven't finished. I'm working on the new one. I will finish it, but I never plan to finish Integrity and Faithlessness. I just don't plan on it. Yeah, Last Hope did have so many discs. If you got the 360 version, I think it had 4 discs. I have it on the other side there. I should check real quick. It did have a lot of discs. I miss the days of multi-disc JRPGs. It definitely died after the 360 era. I think Blue Dragon for 360 had a couple discs. Lost Odyssey had a couple discs for 360. But yeah, I remember there was a time back in the PS1 era, like a game's quality could be decided strictly based on how many discs it had. So like Final Fantasy VII had 4 discs, you knew it was a good game. Legend of Dragoon had a couple discs, you knew it was a good game. If it had 1 disc and it was a JRPG in the PS1 era, especially toward the end of the PS1's lifespan, and only had 1 disc, you're like, oh, I bet that game's trash. Eternalize, 1 disc, no thanks, I'll pass. Yeah, Lost Odyssey, 4 discs, 1 for each more. I love Lost Odyssey. I haven't cried at a lot of video games. Like, I get touched by a lot of video games, but like rarely do they produce an actual tear. Lost Odyssey produced a tear. I can't remember what it was. I think someone's mother dies like within the first like 5 or 6 hours of the game, and I found it like really heart-wrenching for some reason. And I remember I dropped a tear. That may have been the last game that I cried at, actually. Yeah, you know, I thought Lost Odyssey felt like a Sakaguchi game. I loved it because I'm like, this is Sakaguchi to a T. Like, this could be an NES, an SNES, a PS1 game. Like, it could be any of those just wrapped in a 7th gen 360 like graphics wrapper. I really liked Lost Odyssey. It's like, for the longest time, I just scratched my head wondering, like, Microsoft, why haven't you just bought Mistwalker yet? Like, you already have a relationship with them. Just buy Mistwalker. You're on a buying frenzy anyway. Buy them. You need a Japanese studio in your portfolio. Just buy Mistwalker. Rented it at Blockbuster, assumed Parasite says. Oh, I miss Blockbuster. You know, there was something magical about just going in there and seeing walls, you know, floor to ceiling movies and games. And the problem with Blockbuster is I would rent something and I'd never return it. So, you know, I'd rack up like $48 in late fees. And then finally, once like it was past the deadline, they would then also charge me like $20 for the movie. I'm like, wait a second, did I just really pay like $70 for Equilibrium? I think I did that with another Kurt Wimmer movie. I think it was Ultraviolet. I just never returned it. Like, did I really just pay that much money for this movie? I could have just bought the thing at the store for like 18 bucks. Oh, the pass thing. Yeah, I never did that. I should have, clearly. Oh my gosh, Jake, you're speaking to my inner Bradley. Evolution Worlds. The Worlds was the GameCube version, right? That kind of like smashed together Evolution 1 and 2. Gave you like 1 hour of Evolution 1 and then the rest of the game was just Evolution 2. Yeah. I never liked that, even though the audio in Evolution Worlds was significantly better than the two Dreamcast games. But I never liked it because Evolution and the Sacred Device was my favorite of the two, even though the second game was objectively better. But I got Evolution, the first one, for Christmas, so nostalgia. There you go. Church says, I remember playing Evolution on Dreamcast. Yeah, I loved it. Retro says Evolution was an underrated gem for sure. It was. Yeah, I mean, kind of a weird Sting property, right? Like, I feel like Sting, like, when I think of Sting, I think of like Knights in the Nightmare and just like kind of like obscure shit. Evolution, although Evolution was kind of roguelike before roguelikes were like super popular. So I don't know, maybe they were ahead of their time. The one game that I felt was underrated, says Assume Parasite, was Jade Cocoon. Yeah, Jade Cocoon. I loved the aesthetic, the color palette. It felt like a Ghibli film. I don't remember much about the story now. I played it, I beat it once, and that was in like what, 1997. I can't remember anything about it other than like one scene. You're in a tree somewhere and there's like this egg thing. That's I don't maybe I'm confusing games, but I feel like that's that game. Let's see here. Jake said it was all I had access to until I found out it was originally 2 games. Yeah, I think that was a lot of people's experience with Evolution was the GameCube version. I never liked the GameCube cover art either. I thought it looked really just weak. I don't know. They had a lot of people don't know this. There was a WonderSwan Evolution game in Japan. It's super expensive on eBay. It goes for like $300 now. But I would, and it might just be kind of like a demake of the first game. But I would love to own it. It's just super expensive. I don't own the GameCube version though. I own the first 2 on Dreamcast still, and I have the guide for the first Evolution. Anyway. Oh, you know, maybe that's what I'm thinking of, Jake, is the Neo Geo Pocket Color. I don't know. I almost bought Xenogears last weekend. What held you back? Parasite, have you played Xenogears before? Or are you saying you were just kind of like rebuying it? The cost, yeah. Although, you know, Xenogears hasn't gone up in cost like a lot of the other PS1 JRPGs. In fact, I don't feel like most Square PS1 RPGs are as expensive as a lot of the non-Square JRPGs for PS1. I'm trying to think of what would be like the most expensive Square game on the PS1 to purchase right now. Not immediately coming to me. I feel like they were all pretty readily accessible and printed in such high quantities that they never got super expensive. But I do think that Xeno goes for like $150, which of course is expensive. But like when you compare that to Valkyrie Profile, which goes like for $400 and whatever, $50, doesn't, you know, $150 doesn't feel as offensive, although objectively it's still pretty offensive. But yeah, Parasite says, I love the combat system. I did too. I really liked everything about Xenogears. I remember though, it was like, you know, living through that era, like a lot of you folks did as well, apparently. Like, I remember you were like cool if you liked Xenogears. Like if you were in the JRPG club and you like Xenogears, people were like, oh yeah, you really know your games. Like you really know what you're talking about. Like, because it, you know, eventually it became kind of like not cool to like Final Fantasy VII, though that mostly happened a little bit later on, like in the PS2 era. But toward the end there, it's like you couldn't say Final Fantasy VII was your favorite JRPG anymore because people would just be like, oh, of course it is. But if you said Xenogears, people are like, oh yeah, yeah. Let me buy that Xenogears Bible off eBay for like $400 at the time. It was like a Japanese exclusive book that was super expensive on eBay at the time. I can't remember what it was actually called. Tough question. A mint condition version of something like Valkyrie Tactics, it could be pretty high. Well, yeah, like it, yeah. I mean, Valkyrie's super high, but that was Enix before they merged with Square, so that makes sense. I don't think Final Fantasy Tactics is super expensive these days. I could be wrong. I haven't really looked at that. I have a ton of nostalgia for Squaresoft PS1 games, but I don't have a ton of desire to own them again, which is weird. I mean, other than I own Legend of Mana, I own Parasite Eve, I own Saga Frontier. I think that's it. I think that's it from them. Yeah, I was just playing. I got a Polymega not super long ago, but I've been slowly like replaying a bunch of retro stuff because it's so accessible now. I started playing Parasite Eve in October just because I was like, I need a spooky game. So like that game it still holds up. Still holds up. It's still brilliant. The localization is so good. You know, some of those PS1 era localizations are just absolute trash. Not Parasite Eve's. Still looks good, plays well, but holy shit. Aya walks and runs so slow. And I hate when you have to hold a button to run. Like we eventually got away from that, right? Because people were like, well, no one actually like ever just walks around as their character in these games. Everyone just runs. So like, let's just make running the default. But yeah, that was that era where you had to like hold circle to run, and like Aya just runs so slow, and like it's the worst part about that game. Everything else is good though. I really want to get a copy of Ogre Battle 64, says Parasite. Yes, so I don't own Ogre Battle 64. I own Tactics Ogre. I do own that. I do own Tactics Ogre. And then I own a Japanese copy of the SNES version of Tactics Ogre. But I do not own Ogre Battle 64. I have it on the Wii U eShop. The game is so good. So good. I remember as a kid, I sometimes I would read words, but I wouldn't really think about them much. And I remember thinking like, what does person of lordly caliber mean? Like I had no idea what that meant. And I was clearly like old enough to know what that subtitle meant. Like I just didn't get it. It wasn't until much later in life. I'm ashamed to say that. It wasn't until much later in life I like slowed down and said like, oh, a person of lordly caliber. I get it now. That was a low moment for me, folks. But yeah, Ogre Battle 64 is awesome. On one hand, I really want a new Parasite Eve. On the other, I remember how they did Aya dirty in Third Birthday. So, Retro, you're going to hate me. I like Third Birthday. I mean, it wasn't a Parasite Eve game. Honestly, I mean, it wasn't. It was just a weird PSP third-person shooter. But I liked it. I thought it was fun. I thought the storyline was, sufficiently bonkers. That's a hallmark of Parasite Eve games, right? But yeah, I mean, what was it? A couple weeks ago when Square put out like that cryptic tweet, or maybe like someone found a trademark or something, and it had like symbiosis or something in the name, and people were like, "It's Parasite Eve," and then it just turned out to, yes, there we go, Symbiogenesis. That's right, and then it did not turn out to be Parasite Eve. That was truly unfortunate. But hopefully they saw the outpouring of enthusiasm for Parasite Eve, and they'll do something with that. I mean, these days Square they just make games and they just send them out to die. They don't even do marketing campaigns for half their shit anymore. Square's released how many games this year? And I don't think I've ever seen any marketing for any of them other than Tactics Ogre. I saw something like on Facebook at one point. Not to mention like, why would you release Triangle Strategy and Tactics Ogre not only within the same calendar year, but like within the same 6 months? That is very strange to me. It was very weird. I don't know what's happening at Square Enix right now, but I'm very fascinated. I want to be a fly on the wall in the decision-making room where they are deciding to release like 28 games a year and not market any of them. Like in making just weird decisions with some of these like beloved properties. Like, don't get me wrong, I actually am one of the weird people who likes Valkyrie Elysium. I think it's fun as hell. The story's garbage. There practically is no story. And you can see exactly how this thing's going to end and wrap up. But the combat's fun as hell. That's not a Valkyrie game. Why'd they put the Valkyrie? Like, why'd they put the Valkyrie name on that game? It didn't need it. Like, there aren't enough Valkyrie profile fans still around wanting another Valkyrie game to say, oh, you know what, just because it's got Valkyrie in the name, I'm going to buy it. Like, I was one of 10 people who were like, I was that demographic. So, anyway, so weird. They're in a weird spot right now. It's like when Capcom was teasing a game about dragons and it turned out to be another Breath of Fire. Remember Deep Down? Anyone remember that Capcom game? It's supposed to be like an online, kind of like a Souls-ish, maybe a little bit of like Dragon's Dogma. And then it never came to fruition. Nothing. I'm so petty that I will never play Dragon's Dogma for that. Well, that's unfortunate that you won't play Dragon's Dogma because you thought it was going to be something else or whatever your reasoning is there. Like, Dragon's Dogma is good. Dragon's Dogma is real good. I think Oni would be a great game to remake. Was that weird Rockstar PS2 third-person action combat game, or am I misremembering that? I feel like that's Oni. Sin Theory says, I love how being unable to finish a LionWing talks in the intended time is still a thing. It takes me back. Oh yeah, that was definitely a thing that happened. I'd always say like, I'm going to get through these shows in an hour, and then I talk for an hour and 40 minutes. Here we go. We're almost on 2 hours. That's because I just went off on a tangent because I've been drinking too much Jack Daniels. That's okay. We're getting front mission at the end of the month. Okay, so church. So I appreciate everything that Forever Entertainment's doing right now. I think it's awesome that we've got folks who want to dig into the back catalog of games and give them, you know, remakes or remasters. Like their version of, you know, their remake of Panzer Dragoon. Like, okay, like, you know, graphically it didn't look great, but I've never really cared about graphics. I grew up in the 90s. Clearly I don't care about graphics. But, you know, that game could have looked, I don't know, like, I don't know, 10,000 times better. But, like, it played all right. They you know, re-release House of the Dead. Kind of subpar, just like Panzer Dragoon. Take a great property, release it to, you know, mediocre praise. Now Front Mission. So they're doing the first three. And they released that gameplay trailer, like, I don't know, a week and a half ago. Kind of showing off what the game finally looks like. Why does that game look like such garbage? I don't get it. Why does that game look so bad? It looks so bad. I mean, I'm going to buy it because it's Front Mission. And it's on a Switch. Sure. Sold. I'm game. But I'm going to hate playing that thing, or at least looking at it. It is horrible. I am so confused. And like, especially for a game that never got an English release, like that's how you treat it. Ugh. Parasite. It was a Bungie game. That's right. Yeah. Why was I thinking it was Rockstar? But yeah, it was Rockstar was the publisher. There we go. All right. I should have just read one sentence down. Yeah. That was a cool game. I was working at GameStop at the time when it came out. I remember we were always hawking Game Informers or whatever. Even then, I remember there was this cool, like 1-page ad of the main character sitting there, like with guns crossed, a big old chain of bullets around her. Ah, the days of magazines. Where did those go? They died with Blockbuster, I guess. Yeah. Okay. Well, talk about getting away from the topic at hand, folks. Whew. I've digressed. Not like that before. Okay. Well, I think that's probably good. You know, an hour and 50 minutes. That's pretty good for the first LionWing Talks back. So the question is, will I be doing more of these LionWing Talks? Because I was doing them every week for a minute. And the answer is not regularly. Because I do value my time differently than I did just, you know, a year ago. And I also don't want to commit to something that I can't follow through on. That never feels good for anyone involved. But I think I'll do some, you know, on occasion, like I did tonight. And really nothing, like I wasn't planning this for a long time. I was writing the update last night and I was like, you know, fuck it. I'll do a LionWing Talks tomorrow night. Sure, why not? It's Friday. This works. You know, as a parent, you never do anything cool on the weekends any longer. So I'm like, it's better than just sitting around. So, yeah, I'm definitely not going to be doing these things weekly. I don't even know if, I doubt I'll even be doing them monthly. But on occasion, I'd like to come in, talk about some LionWing stuff, answer your questions, shoot the shit. I enjoy talking with everyone. I would love to get folks out of the chat room and onto a mic or on the camera and just talk about all of this stuff. That'd be fun. But yeah, so I will be back with another LionWing Talks. I just don't know when. So there's that. Let me see here. Did I miss anything? As long as we don't go a whole nother year between episodes, I'm down to clown. I will try to make it more frequent than once a year. Now, that's something I can probably commit to. King Neketsu, this has been really cool. Never really interacted with the quote-unquote man behind the curtain in the Kickstarter. Yeah, well, that's kind of what this is for. Not enough people do it, and I just like talking with the people who are excited about our stuff and are, you know, spending their money on our stuff. Like, especially, you know, right now in this economy, global economy, even if you're overseas or international, like, you know, that means something to me. That means a lot to me. And so I feel like the least I can do is talk with folks, answer questions, shoot the shit, talk about projects. Try not to give hints about what our next project is, but basically give a hint exactly about what the next project is by saying you can't give any hints about it because people will know if you give too many hints about it. Ugh. We can teach you Discord's presentation room feature. Yes, yeah. I mean, you know, sometimes I feel like an old man because I get on Discord and I'm like, what is all these buttons for? Which switch do I flip? So yeah, I could certainly use some more Discord schooling. Anyway, I'm rambling as I have for a long time now. So thank you everyone for tuning in. This was episode 34 of LionWing Talks. I am Bradley Hailstorm. And thank you again if you've backed the Kickstarter of Convictor Drive, Armored by Grief. If you haven't backed it, go check it out. It might be something that you're into. If you like Kamen Rider, Ultraman, Tokusatsu stuff, and you're into TTRPGs, could be worth your time. And if you've ever backed us in the past or supported us by buying one of our products, thank you so much. It means the world to me. And that'll do it for tonight. Until next time, folks, take care.